At 5:17 local time, the Strait of Hormuz lost its morning calm inside the Combat Information Center of the lead American destroyer. The initial warning didn't come as a frantic shout. It was a tone, short, sharp, purely mechanical. The exact sound every sailor dreads before any words even drop. A surface search radar operator leaned right into his glowing screen. 3 contacts suddenly flared northeast, low over the water, screaming out from the Iranian coast. These weren't fishing boats, not aircraft, definitely not commercial shipping. Their tracks were way too clean, too fast, perfectly direct. Seconds later, the AEGIS combat system started chewing through the data. Speed, bearing, altitude, flight path, and probability of impact. On the main tactical display, 3 thin lines sliced across the Strait of Hormuz like knives. The first track angled right for the lead destroyer. The second bent sharply toward the cruiser holding the formation's center. The third flew much lower, flatter, aimed dead at the trailing support ship. 3 missiles, 3 United States Navy ships, 0 time to panic. The watch officer called it out, his voice totally flat. Vampires inbound. Multiple tracks bearing northeast. Across the ship, the general alarm screamed. Passageways that were dead silent seconds ago exploded with movement. Sailors rushed, focused, and deliberate. Boots pounded steel decks, hatches slammed, watertight doors sealed. Damage control teams snatched up gear. Weapons crews bolted to their assigned stations. Inside the Combat Information Center, nobody dared look away from the screens. The captain strode onto the bridge and took exactly one look at the display. No yelling, no dramatic speeches, just a sharp, simple command. Set, condition, 1. The destroyer shifted posture in mere seconds. Forward sensors aggressively tightened their scan. Electronic warfare systems sparked to life. Fire control teams locked onto defensive tracks. Up on the weather deck, the 5-inch gun mount pivoted a few degrees, totally deliberate. Meanwhile, the vertical launch system stayed hidden away beneath heavy steel covers. The warship wasn't firing yet, but it was wide awake. Outside, the Strait of Hormuz remained pitch black, trapped in that eerie hour right before dawn. Massive oil tankers pushed through commercial lanes miles away. From the surface, the water looked completely calm. Nothing out there felt like a war zone, but inside the American formation, every single system knew better. The heavy cruiser holding the group's center confirmed the exact same deadly picture. 3 incoming missile tracks, low altitude, high speed, highly probable, anti-ship profile. The trailing support ship was much slower, way less maneuverable. It began turning slightly to open its defensive angle. The entire formation spread out, just enough to deny them one clean target. No panic, poor procedure. At 5:18, the first bridge-to-bridge transmission hit the international distress and hailing frequency. Unidentified missile launch activity detected coming off your coastline. United States Navy vessels are operating in international waters. Cease hostile action immediately. 0 response. They repeated the message. Still nothing. The missiles just kept coming. Back in the Combat Information Center, the AEGIS system kept aggressively building its intercept solution. The lead destroyer's spy radar locked hard onto the highest confidence track. The cruiser grabbed the second. That third track remained the real problem. It was flying much lower than the others, dropping dangerously close to the sea, using the chaotic clutter of waves to hide. The radar operator squinted at the screen. That third track? Sea-skimming, flashing on and off. The whole room's mood instantly flipped. Sea-skimming missiles aren't just blindingly fast. They are built to pop up late, drop off radar, and leave you mere seconds to react. It hugs the deck, forcing radar systems to fight ocean spray, heavy glare, and the Earth's actual curve. The captain shot a tense look at his tactical officer. Time to first intercept. 4 minutes, 30 seconds. 4 minutes flat. That is all the fleet had before the first weapon smashed into their defensive zone. At 5:19, electronic warfare teams started flooding the sky with absolute confusion. Heavy jamming signals blasted outward. Decoys powered up. Chaff launchers locked in. Every vessel instantly shared live data, stitching together a single massive radar picture of the incoming strike. If one ship spotted a threat, all three knew it. That is the major difference between sitting ducks and a unified U.S. Navy strike group. The lead Iranian missile pitched up, then slammed back down. It was actively hunting. Number 2 started banking hard, trying to open a better attack angle on the cruiser. The third stayed dead flat, locking its sight straight on the weakest ship in the formation. The cruiser called weapons free for defensive fire. The destroyer immediately followed suit. At 5:20, the captain issued the order that flipped this standoff straight into survival mode. Engage all inbound threats. Deep below deck, inside the launch tubes, heavy machinery fired faster than anyone could blink. A steel hatch blasted open, scorching gas vented. Then, the first American interceptor ripped out of the hull on a massive pillar of fire. An SM-2 missile punched into the morning sky, banking sharply toward the Iranian threat. The cruiser launched a second interceptor right behind it. Then a third screamed across the strait. The morning silence shattered. On radar, all three incoming missiles just kept chewing up distance. American interceptors climbed fast to meet them, steered by the fleet's own sensors. Raw math and pure human instinct boiled down to one single choice. The bridge went dead silent. Nobody dared ask what would happen if those interceptors actually missed their mark. Because they already knew, if one got through, steel would meet fire at hundreds of miles per hour. A destroyer could lose radar, lose its engines, or lose the ability to defend the fleet. And here in the Strait of Hormuz, a single crippled warship could choke this vital waterway into a global crisis within minutes. At 5:21, that first intercept countdown flashed across the main tactical screen. 10 seconds. 9. The lead destroyer held steady. The cruiser kept its hard lock. The supply ship kept turning, slow but agonizingly steady, dragging its stern away from the incoming threat. Then a massive explosion flashed just beyond the horizon, too far out to see from the deck, but easily bright enough to paint a massive glowing bloom across the infrared sensors. That first Iranian missile was just gone. No cheers, no sudden relief, because the second was still inbound, and number 3 just vanished from radar entirely. At 5:22, the Aegis wall came alive. That first hostile missile was shredded miles beyond visual range. But nobody standing in that strike group treated it like a win. One kill meant absolutely nothing, with 2 more weapons still screaming through the strait. Inside the cruiser's combat information center, all eyes locked onto that second track, because it wasn't flying straight anymore. It banked slightly south, changing its angle. The cruiser had to crunch a new intercept path instantly. That is the terrifying reality of modern anti-ship missiles. They do not just fly straight like bullets. Some adjust, some dip, hiding in sea clutter. Some force defenders to burn their interceptors early, leaving the ship totally exposed later on. The tactical action officer stared at his screen. Track 2 is maneuvering. The captain stayed dead still, maintained solution. The cruiser radar locked on tighter. The AEGIS system updated the track, crunching kill probabilities faster than anyone could even blink. Range, closure rate, altitude, intercept window, and kill assessment. A second SM-2 was already airborne. It climbed hard, then rolled over toward the incoming threat. Its exhaust trail sliced through the dawn like a jagged white scar. Down below, the Strait was waking up. Commercial ships were scrambling to alter course. Tankers steadily navigating the Strait of Hormuz backed off, trying to buy some extra space. Nobody had to explain what was going on. When warships start firing interceptors at dawn, the message is crystal clear. Stay back. The second Iranian missile suddenly dropped lower. For 2 agonizing seconds, the cruiser radar signal faded. Then it snapped back. Track 2 reacquired, the interceptor adjusted. Inside the dark combat center, sailors watched those symbols converge. Nobody was checking the clock anymore. Time just did not matter here. Everything was measured in pure distance. 7 miles, 5 miles, 3. The SM-2 closed in. The Iranian missile hugged the waves, dragging the intercept down into a tight, messy slice of air right above the water. Then the screen flashed. A bright white bloom popped on infrared. The second missile shattered. Burning fragments scattered violently across the sea, hissing as they slammed into the water. The cruiser called in the kill with the exact same deadpan voice used for the weather. Track 2 neutralized, 2 missiles down, only 1 left. And this third one was the absolute worst threat. Still blinking on radar, skimming dangerously low, and gunning for the support ship at the rear. The destroyer radar grabbed it for a split second. The cruiser caught it right after. Then the support ship's own defensive sensors picked it up. A faint return, but real, tearing across the water fast. The track had not vanished at all. It was hiding. At 5:24, the support ship shifted its defensive posture. Chaff launchers armed, decoy systems hot. Close-in weapons switched over to automatic engagement mode, hunting the horizon for a clean lock. Damage control teams retreated deep into the hull, bracing for a hit they tried not to picture. Up on the bridge, the deck officer watched the bow turn. It was just too painfully slow. Massive ships cannot simply dodge missiles. They only create angles. They buy precious seconds. They make that weapon work harder. That third missile crossed the 10-mile mark. The destroyer fired first. An ESSM ripped from its tube, smaller, faster, engineered for a brutal knife fight. It banked hard across the fleet, desperately trying to intercept before the threat breached the ship's final ring of defense. For a split second, the math worked. Then, the incoming missile dipped again. The ESSM screamed past, almost too close to call at first. The blast rocked the missile's flight path, but didn't destroy it. Inside the CIC, the kill assessment flashed. Track 3, degraded, not neutralized. The exact sentence nobody wanted to hear. The Iranian missile was crippled, but still coming. Now it was flying lower, totally unstable and wildly unpredictable. A pristine missile follows math. A wounded missile can tumble, overcorrect, or just snap apart at the absolute worst second. It could still slam the hull, or airburst right above the main deck, or smash into the ocean, sending lethal shrapnel ripping through exposed radar arrays. The support ship's phalanx system spun toward the threat. The white dome locked on. The gun barrels spooled up. At 5:25, the final defense layer was pure reality. It was ready to shoot. The weapon flared back onto radar. 3 miles out, the cruiser fired another ESSM. The destroyer streamed target data across the network. The support ship held its sharp turn. Every single ship was dead set on one jagged object skimming just above the waves. 2 miles. The second ESSM rushed the flank, detonating right beside the incoming threat. The blast ripped chunks off the weapon, but the main fuselage just kept coming, dragging flames and debris. Deep in the support ship, the alert hit the comms. Brace for close intercept. The phalanx opened up. There is absolutely no elegant sound when a close-in weapon engages. It does not boom like a cannon. It sounds like a buzzsaw shredding the sky. Thousands of rounds flooded the airspace dead ahead, throwing up a titanium wall the missile had to punch through. On the infrared screen, the Iranian missile became a violent blur. Then it completely vanished in a flash of blinding white heat. One heartbeat later, twisted metal slammed the water off the starboard bow. The shockwave hammered the entire ship. Sailors felt the sheer violence through the deck. Sea spray shot way above the bridge windows. Burning fragments hissed into the dark water and died. For 3 heavy seconds, dead silence. Then, the damage reports started hitting. No hull breach, no flooding, minor topside scrapes. The ship is still fighting. The third missile died, but the Strait of Hormuz was anything but quiet. At 5:27, the destroyer's electronic warfare team caught a new signal pulsing from the Iranian coast. Not an airborne missile, a heavy fire control radar. Active, pinging, searching for a lock. The tactical screen shifted again. The captain locked eyes on the display. Iran shot once. And now, hidden on that jagged coastline, another lethal system was waking up. At 5:27, the entire battlefield shifted. The incoming missiles were gone. The ocean around the fleet was still boiling violently from that last intercept. Wreckage drifted off the support ship's starboard bow, black, scorched metal bobbing in the heavy chop. Damage control crews were sprinting through the upper decks, inspecting antennas, shredded wiring, radar mounts, and heavy blast doors. The strike group was alive, but this nightmare was far from over. Inside the lead destroyer's combat room, the electronic warfare officer locked onto a strange new signal. Not flying, not moving, not civilian radio. A dedicated fire control radar had just powered up on the Iranian shore. The beam was incredibly narrow, tightly focused, and deliberate. It wasn't sweeping the ocean blind. It was hunting for a specific target. Then the signal tightened again. It was staring right at the fleet. The EW officer called the warning. New emitter. Coastal Fire Control Radar bearing 031. Everyone in the room knew exactly what that meant. A hostile missile battery doesn't even have to shoot to be completely deadly. First it hunts, then it tracks. Finally, it hands off targeting data. After that, the actual launch takes just seconds. The captain watched the tactical screens, dead silent, tracing that launch origin. Computers ripped the battle backward in time, pulling radar tracks from the first salvo. Infrared heat from the intercepts. Electronic emissions bleeding off the coast. Satellite cues, P8, patrol data. Every single sensor that witnessed the ambush now hunted the exact hand that fired it. On the main display, a box popped near the Iranian shore. Then 2 more. Possible launch zone, probable mobile battery, confirmed radar emitter. The Navy did not just have one picture. They had layers, each layer sharper. At 5:29, the support ship called in its damage report. No hull breach, no flooding, just light shrapnel damage to exposed topside gear. One sailor treated for shock after slamming hard into a steel bulkhead. The vessel could still move, still talk to the fleet, still hold its combat formation. That mattered. A wounded ship slows everything down. A dead ship anchors the whole group. In the Strait of Hormuz, standing still is a death sentence. The cruiser drifted slightly east, putting armored steel between the coast and the supply vessel. The destroyer slid west, clearing its weapon arcs to fire. From a bird's-eye view, this was no routine patrol. It was a giant shield raising up. At 5:31, the shoreline radar pulsed again, shorter, much sharper this time. The tactical officer snapped his head up. They're refining targeting data. Nobody had to ask who they meant. The captain issued his next direct order. Prepare counter-battery options. Defensive response only. That specific phrase mattered. Pure defense. Not mindless escalation, not blind punishment, and definitely not a broad sweep. The Navy had one very simple job right then: stop a second launch. The destroyer verified its vertical launch tubes. The cruiser built up weapon-quality target data. The wounded support ship kept clearing debris, desperately restoring its sensor coverage. Every single command spoken in hushed tones, logged, repeated, confirmed. A U.S. Navy warship does not pivot from defense to a brutal strike out of anger. It pulls the trigger because the threat chain remains active. At 5:33, the P-8 Poseidon, circling just outside the kill zone, beamed down an update. Its thermal cameras caught fresh heat signatures, mobile launch vehicles parked by a rocky coastal dirt road. One truck sat totally stationary, another was rolling. A third heat bloom idled right next to what looked like a camouflaged radar truck. Then the drone feed kicked in, grainy at first, before snapping clear. 3 heavy vehicles parked near some shipping containers and low concrete bunkers. The containers passed for civilian from afar, but the spacing was wrong, way too deliberate, too clean. A radar mast cranked up between 2 boxes, then dropped back down halfway, like the crew knew they were spotted. The Combat Information Center went dead silent for a split second. That was the final confirmation. This missile battery was not theoretical anymore. Very real. At 5:35, the Iranian radar locked on them again. This time, the support ship's early warning receivers caught it directly. A harsh warning tone blasted across the bridge. For a split second, that earlier missile strike flashed through everyone's mind. The low skimming track, the final burst from the phalanx gun, shrapnel crashing down close enough to rattle the hull. But nobody froze. The captain just turned to his tactical action officer. If that battery fires again, engage immediately. The response came back. Aye, Captain. Then the radar vanished. Not destroyed, just silent. That was worse. A radar left on is easily tracked. A radar blinking on and off, that is a totally different game. It flashes just long enough to update the active missile battery. Then it cuts out before any weapon can ride the beam home. The Iranian crew wasn't panicking. They were still running the drill. At 5:37, the vehicle on the drone feed parked beside the hidden launcher. Heat signatures spiked around its rear. A heavy support truck backed right toward it. Crew bolted between the trucks. The tactical assessment flashed across the destroyer's screen. Probable reload. The captain read the alert once. Then he issued an order that flipped the script. Find me a clean shot. Instantly, the cruiser pushed coordinates into the network. The P-8 aircraft confirmed the emitter's last spot. The drone kept visual. The destroyer's combat team started locking in a precision strike solution, yet they waited. Because inside the narrow Strait of Hormuz, packed with civilian ships, steel isn't enough. The shot had to be perfect, the flight path completely clear of traffic. The target absolutely verified. Then, at 5:39, the radar mast pushed up again. A thin signal sliced right across the strait. The hostile battery was waking up. But this time, the U.S. Navy wasn't just sitting there playing defense. It was aiming back. At 5:41, the response package was approved. No big speech from the bridge, no raised voices, no Hollywood dramatic countdown. Just raw coordinates pushed through the combat network verified across 3 warships, a patrol plane, and a drone quietly circling miles above the Iranian coast. This wasn't a guess anymore. The Iranian coastal missile battery had shown its hand 3 times. First with the initial launch, then firing up that radar, and finally the reload. That was enough. Inside the dark combat information center, the tactical officer leaned close to his monitor, running through the target file one absolute last time. Mobile launcher, a coastal radar truck, probable command vehicle, possible reload unit. 0 civilian ships in the strike corridor. No commercial planes crossing the route. No friendly forces trapped inside the impact zone. The captain quietly absorbed the full report. Then came the order. Execute limited defensive strike. Limited. That single word really mattered. The U.S. Navy wasn't kicking off a full-scale coastal war. They weren't just blindly spraying steel into the dark. They were surgically removing one active missile site from the kill chain before it fired. Deep below deck, the destroyer's vertical launch system roared alive. A forward cell unlocked, then another. The entire warship shuddered. The first Tomahawk cruise missile blasted upward, surfing a massive pillar of fire before banking hard toward the Iranian shoreline. Seconds later, a second missile followed. Then a third bird, programmed for a completely different aim point inside that same compound. The massive destroyer didn't drop its speed. It never even pivoted toward the shore. It simply fired, logged the strike data, and held its tight formation. Utter, cold discipline. One section of the ship had just hurled precision weapons at an imminent coastal threat. Meanwhile, another deck was still tracking shipping lanes. Another crew actively watched for small attack boats. And another scanned the horizon for incoming missiles. A modern warship never fixates on just one danger. It splinters its attention without ever losing control. At 5:42, the cruiser joined the fight, not with missiles, but with heavy electronic warfare. Its systems blasted interference straight at the coastal radar band, flooding the airwaves with blinding static. The mission was dead simple. Blind the launcher just long enough so it couldn't feed targeting data to another missile. The Iranian radar flared up, warped into static, then died entirely. Inside the support ship's combat center, that terrifying hard-lock tone stopped. For the first time in almost 20 minutes, the rear ship wasn't being painted by radar. But no one exhaled yet. The Tomahawks were still flying. The drone feed caught movement at the launch site, bright heat signatures scrambling between containers. One truck rolled out from behind a low concrete wall, desperate to escape the kill zone. Another stayed parked by the radar mast. The mobile launcher had crept forward a few meters, nowhere near enough. It was still in the kill box. At 5:44, the first Tomahawk crossed the coast. It skimmed in low, way too low for early radar warnings, and too steady to waste motion. Its exact route was mapped to dodge any unnecessary exposure, hugging the terrain and riding sea level right until those final seconds. The Iranian radar truck tried fighting back. A faint signal suddenly popped up. Then the cruiser buried it in heavy jamming. The first warhead slammed into the radar truck. On the drone camera, a blinding white flash hit, followed by a hard thermal bloom. The mast evaporated. Fire and dust instantly swallowed the entire truck. On the destroyer's screen, the hostile signal died immediately. No fade-out, just gone. Emitter totally offline. Electronic warfare officers confirmed the second Tomahawk hit mere seconds later. Its target was the missile launcher. It struck the camouflage truck from above and behind, right where the launch rails and highly volatile fuel systems sat. The blast was much bigger than expected. A secondary blast ripped through instantly, hurling glowing shrapnel outward and lighting up the surrounding containers. That told the control room everything. The site was packed with either extra missiles, extra fuel, or both. Secondary explosions confirmed. The ship captain stayed totally silent. He just stared at the screen. One-third target remained the command vehicle. It started moving right before the first hit, trying to reach a road heading further inland. But the drone held it dead center. The truck sped up, then braked like the driver could not decide whether to bolt or hide. The third Tomahawk adjusted. In the final few seconds, its seeker locked directly onto the moving heap. The command truck vanished in a massive flash, flattening the dust and leaving nothing but a burning scorch mark on the road. At 5:46, the site went dead silent. No active radar, zero movement near the launcher. No fresh missile tracks. The drone circled the smoke once, then pulled back. The storage containers burned out. The launcher was completely destroyed. The radar truck was gone, and the command unit was a burning shell. A reload truck stalled out near the site perimeter. It was damaged, but wasn't throwing off any launch signatures. Inside the destroyer, the final report came back perfectly clean. Coastal battery neutralized. Still, the naval formation did not relax. Out here in the Strait of Hormuz, one dead threat rarely means safe waters. It just means the next threat hasn't shown its face yet. The cruiser kept its active jamming posture for another minute, while the destroyer kept its defensive missiles hot. The support ship finally restored full communications and kept running damage checks. Lookouts hunted for speedboats. Radar teams swept for hostile aircraft. Sonar operators listened beneath the hull. The strike took minutes. The fallout would last hours. At 5:49, a commercial tanker called over the radio. Was the shipping lane clear? The American response was short. Keep your distance. Hold your assigned heading. The naval formation kept pushing west through the Strait of Hormuz. Behind them, black smoke choked the coastline. Ahead of them, the waters stayed wide open. On every glowing screen inside the Combat Information Center, one brutal fact mattered above all else. Iran had pulled the trigger. Missiles failed. The launcher was vaporized. But the entire Strait of Hormuz was still watching. By 6:12, the sun crested over Hormuz. All 3 U.S. Navy warships were still moving. The lead destroyer held its course. The cruiser locked down the center of the fleet. The supply vessel, still wearing fresh scars from the close intercept, kept pace behind them. Nothing about the fleet looked broken. That was the whole point. Missiles had just ripped across one of the most volatile transit choke points on Earth. Yet the American vessels refused to scatter, stop, or turn back. They ate the shock, neutralized the threat, leveled the source, and pushed forward. Inside the support vessel, damage control teams were scrambling. The starboard side ate hot shrapnel from that final missile blast. A sensor housing cracked wide open. One exposed antenna got sliced clean off by debris. Black scorch marks streaked the upper deck where jagged fragments skipped across steel, sinking into the sea. But the hull held up. No flooding, zero loss of propulsion, no fires spreading below. The ship was hurt, but far from crippled. That distinction mattered. Up on the destroyer bridge, the captain stared at the tactical display. The Iranian coast slowly shifted astern. That shattered missile battery was no longer painting them with radar. No second salvo dropped from the sky. No attack boats rushed out from nearby harbors. No hostile aircraft closing in from the north. For the first time since 5/17, the fleet could finally breathe. But nobody relaxed. Out on the water, silence never means safety. It is just silence. Down in the Combat Information Center, the digital replay had already started. They were dissecting every single second of the ambush. The first missile launch, the sudden radar lock, the interceptor flight paths. The second, missile dodging. The third one skimming low, vanishing into the digital sea clutter. The phalanx firing, the coastal radar waking up, the Tomahawk strike. Every tiny detail became data. Every data point formed new doctrine, because that is exactly how the Navy survives the next ambush. Not by acting like this fight was clean, it was anything but clean. The third missile got way too close. The support ship caught hot shrapnel. The first ESSM failed to completely vaporize its target. The Iranian battery almost had time to fire again. Those hard truths would be dissected, logged, and used to sharpen the whole system. That is the difference between pure luck and cold professionalism. Luck says the warships survived. Professionalism asks exactly why. At 6:20, the cruiser confirmed full defensive readiness was restored. The supply vessel reported perfectly stable systems. The destroyer held its weapons posture, but dropped the active fire control radar pointed right at the shoreline. The surgical strike did exactly what it needed to. The hostile battery was gone. The formation stayed intact. The massive waterway remained open. That was the message. Not shouted, not broadcast, just delivered. Iran banked on speed, surprise, and geography. The Strait of Hormuz is narrow. It rewards whoever shoots first. Missiles fired from the shoreline barely have to travel at all. Warships trapped inside the strait have little room to maneuver and almost no time to react. That was their gamble, but the U.S. Navy brought something else to the fight. A network. A single radar did not defend one hull. 3 ships shared one battle space. One aircraft fed the picture. One drone confirmed the target. A cruiser jammed the radar. A destroyer fired the strike. One support ship survived because the formation fought as a single breathing machine. That is what Iran hit. Not 3 isolated targets, a completely unified system. At 6:34, the first civilian tanker resumed normal speed behind the American formation. Then another. Then a massive container ship adjusted back toward the traffic lane. Commercial crews had watched the night sky completely light up. They saw interceptors rip from American decks. They saw dark smoke on the coast. And now they watched those same 3 U.S. ships still cutting through the strait. That image carried its own heavy weight. Warships do not need to talk when they hold their course under enemy fire. Back in Washington, the initial reports would trickle in later. Careful language, confirmed defensive actions, no massive escalation, no wild claims. At Fleet Command, the entire timeline would be reconstructed down to the second. Intel analysts would dissect the Iranian radar signatures, the launch sequence, and reload patterns. But for the sailors who actually lived through it, the lesson was simple. The alarm screamed, the missiles dropped in, and the system held. And when the source showed itself, the Navy wiped it out. By 6:47, the formation cleared the deadliest part of the transit, but they did not bolt. They did not celebrate. No flares were fired. No dramatic messages for the cameras. They locked back into controlled movement, scanning the horizon like another threat was already forming. Because that is how real deterrence works. Not with noise, with readiness. The side that panics loses complete control. The side overreacting sparks the next crisis. And the side that waits too long might not survive. Somewhere between those 3 fatal mistakes is a very tight lane every commander must find. That morning in the Strait of Hormuz, the Navy found it. 3 missiles were fired at 3 American ships. None of them reached their targets. The battery that launched them was destroyed, and the formation kept moving. Here is the question. If you stood inside that combat information center, watching Iranian missiles lock onto 3 U.S. ships, would you have ordered that same limited strike or hit every launcher on that coast before another salvo could even rise? Drop your take in the comments below, because out here, restraint is never weakness. It is pure control. And control keeps a narrow waterway from exploding into a war zone. Iran fired the incoming missiles. The U.S. Navy wrote the ending.